Welcome to the Soul Grit Podcast. I'm Ann Taylor McNeese, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I also love Jesus, and I'm passionate about all things gospel and therapy. I created Soul Grit to be at the intersection of mental health and Christian faith. Christ followers need a place to ask questions and get answers about mental health. Join me as we dive into real stories and real questions from people who want to honor God with their hearts, souls, and minds. Hi, welcome back to the Soul Grit Podcast. This is Ann, and I'm happy to announce that we are celebrating the 2-year anniversary of the Soul Grit Podcast today. Now, the Soul Grit Podcast officially launched on June 1st of 2021. So we're a few days past the actual anniversary, but this is what worked in our recording schedule. So I want to take a few minutes today just to go over where we've been in the podcast this past year and where we're going, and also provide a few life updates for myself and just kind of have a chat with you about how things are going. So I have to admit that doing an individual solo episode where I just talk to you is not my favorite format. But for today's purposes, I felt like it was a necessary thing for me to do just to kind of speak from my heart. So let's get into it. Some of the new things that happened on season 2 of the Soul Grit Podcast was that we welcomed our co-host, Jessica Doan, in the fall. And she was really helpful to me as she was finishing up her graduate school and working towards her license in marriage and family therapy. She was so in the zone of being able to synthesize and pull together information that it was really helpful for me to help have her do some of the research and bounce ideas off of and be able to have a dialogue here on the podcast. And so in the fall, we did a few really good series, which I encourage you to go back and listen to. Something that has really been on my heart as a therapist and as a follower of Jesus is just understanding trauma and helping people who are just followers of Jesus and also ministers and lay ministers to understand how trauma impacts our development and the whole the course of your life. If you've experienced trauma in your life, which newsflash, everyone has, that causes us to change course in how we interact with people or how our body operates in the world. So those episodes about trauma were really important to me. If you know somebody who is struggling to understand what trauma is, how we should look at it as Christians, or what you can do to treat it, I encourage you to go back to those episodes from the fall of 2022. As the fall was heating up, I also felt I was starting to feel more and more stressed as a parent, as well as a therapist, and by the busyness of schedules. And so this is something that I see in my office, as well as just in my own family life and the lives of the other families from church that we interact with, that we just get busy as families. And if we're not intentional with our time and our choices and our discipleship of our kids, that we are going to really be in trouble in terms of protecting our bodies, protecting our minds, protecting our relationships. And so we had a series of episodes that talked about what the impact of busyness is and what we can do about it, how we need to try practicing the Sabbath, which is a little bit different for modern Christians. It's maybe not something that's totally talked about at all of our churches, but is still right there in the Bible for us. One of our most popular episodes during the fall was our episode on spoon theory, which is something that, was introduced from the world of chronic illness, but has been really useful for people with mental health conditions, or just, if you're an introvert versus an extrovert, you might feel like you have fewer spoons. If you don't know what I'm talking about, In terms of spoons, the spoon theory episode came out on January 2nd of this year. And that was actually part of a series where we were talking about bodies. And I think we actually had a little bit more to say about bodies that we had planned to talk about. And that was right in the time when my body broke down and I had the vertebral artery dissection followed by a cerebellar stroke, which took me out of commission for a few months. I was able to get back to practicing with a handful of clients in just a few weeks, but then to get everything back up and running, it was a couple of months. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how I'm doing with my health in a few minutes, but that actually changed course a little bit for the podcast as well, because it caused there to be a gap in the episodes that I was able to record. And then following that, I just decided, it would be better for me to record fewer episodes and be able to show up consistently. And so that's when we changed gears to having a bi-weekly instead of weekly podcast. Another thing that happened over the course of that winter season as I was recovering is that our co-host Jess also was launching into a new season of her career and was not able to continue to be our co-host. So she just discovered that she was busy with the demands of working on her license and ministering with her husband, who's a pastor, and taking care of her kids and baseball and all of that. And so she was not able to join us on the episodes this spring. But at that same time, what happened for me was that I realized that one of the things I like best about podcasts and about my journey in podcasting is guest interviews. And I think I like it because I'm an extrovert and I like to have conversations with anybody, really. But I really like the part about meeting new people, being able to invite people to have conversations with me that I wouldn't otherwise naturally have, and then just being able to expose the rest of the audience to these conversations that I'm having that I think are really interesting and provide them with some new resources and new information and encouragement. So that was a really cool part about the beginning of this year, 2023. I got to start doing more interviews again. I talked to some authors about suffering, about anxiety, about OCD. I talked to another therapist about mental health and people of color. I got to talk about church connections and why we need to have more networking between therapists and pastors, and addictions in young people, careers. There's been some really vast variety of kinds of interviews and people that I've gotten to talk to, and that's what I'm going to continue to do for this summer. Last summer, I took the summer off as we traveled with our family, and this summer, because of the bi-weekly pace of the podcast and just some things that I've got lined up already, I think we will be able to get by without a huge break in the summers. You can expect to get new episodes every other week as we go through the summer, and I'll continue to be brainstorming about new things for the fall. So thank you for hanging in there with me as we've gone through this great season of the Soul Grip podcast. Now, as promised, I do want to give you a little update on my health. Let's see, my stroke actually happened the week of Thanksgiving. So if that gives you a little frame of reference, in January, I was able to start driving again, to start exercising again, and to start getting myself down to the office as well so that I could see clients in person. I slowly started picking up the pace a little bit on how many clients I was seeing, as well as all the other activities that are required for a wife and mom one of the really great things that I was able to do was to start leading a group fitness class at my church on Wednesday nights. While my daughter goes to youth group, I go into a different room and I'm able to lead a group of ladies in faith-based fitness through Revelation Wellness, as I've talked about before on the podcast. And that has been just a great opportunity to praise God for my healing and that I was able to do that. Whereas in November, I didn't know, I had no idea what my future would hold and what my healing would look like. In April, I had a new brain scan, MRI and MRA, and I was told that my brain no longer shows any signs of the stroke and that my vertebral artery dissection has healed. My artery looks a little bit more narrow than it used to, but my doctor assures me that people can live with narrow arteries. So that is good news. We were praising God for that healing. Now, just because the scans say that it looks okay, I'm sure you all understand that that doesn't always mean you feel okay. So I do continue to struggle a little bit with feelings of dizziness or nausea or just being wiped out more easily than I used to. My stamina is not quite what it was before. So I am continuing to heal and working on all the things that I always tell all of you. I'm eating healthy food. I'm exercising regularly. I'm trying to get 8 hours of sleep a night. I'm connecting with friends and family and church members, and I'm continuing in this walk with my Lord. One of the things that's been really interesting to me in my recovery process is that it all feels like it means something. You know, I did that series in the fall about busyness and making good intentional choices for your family and taking rest and practicing Sabbath. That flowed right into the series about the body and what your body means for your mental health as well as your faith and how we can take care of that. What was really interesting was that after I had just spent that time talking to you about those issues, then God just really brought both of those things into focus in my own life. So basically, it felt like, although I wanted to take this slow and gradual, progressive journey towards understanding what those things meant, it was almost like God had a different plan for me, just to have like a crash course in understanding. Like you can't push your body in that way. Not that I think that I did anything wrong that caused the stroke. I don't actually have any risk factors or anything like that. My doctor actually said it was a fluke, which is not the most comforting thing to hear from your doctor. But there was something meaningful in that I had to slow down to take care of my body in a different way and to learn how to rest in a different way as well. So I'm still figuring out what that means exactly for my life as a whole. As I got better and things picked up again after the holidays, I found myself feeling much the same way as I felt in the fall when I was complaining about the baseball schedule and there's too many activities going on for our family, and how do we make good choices about this? How do we care for our bodies? And so I really had this sense or a conviction that I didn't want things to go back to quote unquote normal as they were before, because there was something that didn't feel quite right or healthy about that. And yet feels kind of countercultural, or maybe that's not the best word, but you're paddling upstream to try to have a different style of life. So that's something that I'm still trying to figure out and will continue to work on. And I'll let you know if I figure that out. But I have a feeling that that's going to be a lifelong process. And in the meantime, I've been asking for different types of help.
If you've listened to the Soul Grip podcast for even one episode, you know my guests and I believe that when we integrate the power of God with the wisdom of modern psychology, we get supercharged healing, change, and growth in counseling. As a Christian therapist, however, I realize that there are many practitioners out there who are personally Christians but don't know how to integrate their faith into their counseling practices. That's why I created the e-course, Faith Integration for Therapists. In this premium 5-module course, therapists who love Jesus will learn everything from understanding their calling, to marketing their practices to Christians, to adapting evidence-based interventions to honor our faith. You can learn more about the online course at www.soulgritresources.com/courses and send an email to info@soulgritresources.com to receive a discount code.
At some point, I'm also going to tell you a little bit about the different kind of counseling that I've been participating in this spring. I will have that for you probably in the summer or the fall. I'll talk about that a little bit more, which has been really great and excruciating at the same time, as I'm sure you understand if you've been through different types of counseling, that sometimes while you know that you are healing, you're also doing some pretty hard work and opening up some areas that are sometimes kind of painful. So I'm looking forward to talking to you more about that in the future. In the meantime, I still want to encourage you that it means a lot to me if you share the podcast, if you review the podcast, if you give us ratings. One of the things that has been most encouraging to me is that I will get a message here and there, a text message, or somebody might mention something in person or a phone call about something that has happened in your life that has been improved or impacted because of something that you heard on the podcast. Recently, a friend texted me with a story about somebody that she encountered that the interaction could have gone really in a bad direction if she had not just been listening to one of the episodes that helped her understand a particular diagnosis. And so as much as it's hard as a newer, smaller podcast without a huge platform to keep going and to keep investing in this, it is encouraging to me when I get those messages that just remind me, like, God called me to do this, and however many people hear my voice and the voice of my guests, that is who God has intended to hear that message, and that it is helpful and encouraging. So with that, I would say I want to be a ministry. I want to be a service to people. If there are questions that you have or topics that you think I should cover or something you'd like to know more of, something maybe a format or a topic that you would like to hear about on the Soul Grit podcast, I would be happy to create episodes that meet your needs. So I encourage you once again to email me at info@soulgritresources.com, and that comes directly to me. I will respond directly to you, and I'm happy to make this be something that really works for your needs. So I appreciate you so much. If you've gotten this far and you're listening, you are a blessing to me. So keep hanging in there with me as we launch into season 3 of the Soul Grit podcast. The Soul Grit podcast is a production of Soul Grit Resources. You can find more at soulgritresources.com or on the socials at Soul Grit Resources. You can email me at info@soulgritresources.com.